let's dive in. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on. First of all, how are you over 18?
I am over 18. I'm allowed to be on this chat for
Oh,
now.
amazing. You have to ask me because I look so youthful.
Yeah, Noelle, are you over 18?
I'm over 18. I promise. You have to take my word for it though, because I'm not telling you how old I am, and I'm not giving you any identification.
That's a very sound policy. Well, so okay, let's start in reverse of this because we're going to spend the brunt of the conversation talking about why age verification laws are um, misinformed, are maybe missing the mark.
Yeah, generous. That's a generous
Yes,
take.
thank you. I'm starting as neutral as I can.
Yeah.
But let's first do the work of like steel manning them. Like,
Mhm.
what is the intention with age verification laws? And if you had to defend them, what would be the defense for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in good faith, and I do try to approach things like this with good faith. And in good faith, I understand that people are concerned for youth sexuality. people the kids are fucking weird. And I think that that's fair. And I think that classically a lot of that fear is being routed onto pornography. I think that the internet generally kind of represents this largely kind of mysterious, unmoderated, now place that in so many ways has more significance than many, if not all, IRL spaces. So I think that there's a lot of confusion and fear on how to control that and control what we have access to. And that's been ongoing since Communications Decency Act in the 90s, and the various conversations around moderating digital space and use and access. And I think that the thinking obviously is that people like to try to make a direct application to the real world with online space and online access. So I think a lot of what I hear is like, well, if you are buying a pornographic magazine, or you're walking into a porn theater in quote unquote the real world, you are expected to prove that you are over 18. You're expected to show identification. And I think that people are trying to make that direct application to the digital world. I just don't think that is. I don't think it works that way.
Hmm. All right, well, let's get to it. Uh, for starters, maybe to set the scene. So just for folks who maybe haven't seen, there are proposed laws in Europe, and now a case being heard by the Supreme Court, if I have my facts straight,
Yeah.
um, to implement age verification laws, which require essentially KYC, know your customer, to access not just adult websites, but adult websites are the kind of like, um, are the effigy being burned, the symbol for this. But that would entail uploading your ID and yeah, basically all the things that come with KYC. Any site where you have to pay by credit card, that's a version of that accomplishes KYC. So making sure I have my facts straight. That's Europe and the US right now.
Yeah.
Are there
So
any
the
other?
US in the US there have been laws and bills, or the laws being passed and bills kind of attempted to be passed and are now passing since 2022, I believe. Even 2021 is like when this kind of conversation started at the state level. And since kind of January, there's been an ongoing Supreme Court case that Free Speech Coalition has been working on, around kind of the fact that this is an unconstitutional attempt. And like there have actually been a few previous, but a couple major Supreme Court cases that have been thrown out because this attempt is technically unconstitutional. Oh my gosh, this keeps falling. And then, like, the concept of like slippery slope, I think, gets applied. But I don't even think that that goes far enough, because with legislation, obviously, it operates largely by precedent. So it's not even like the slope is slippery. It's like if the path has been trod before, it will be easy to trod it again. So I think that people are concerned about where this is going, and then in the UK, they just, as you said, launched their own age verification, and I think that there's a lot of interesting terminology or like wording with this legislation, with these bills. For example, harmful to minors is the terminology that's being specifically used around age verification sites. And so, for example, in these like earlier bills and laws that were passed, it was in the States, platforms that have 33.3% of content or more that is quote unquote harmful to minors are eligible for this legislation. And I think that's really interesting. I think that there's a lot to unpack with harmful to minors, to be honest, and like how that gets applied and how I disagree with it being applied.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it. What is
Mm.
yeah, what's the problem with harmful to minors? Or rather, what are the maybe let's start with assumptions baked into that phrase that are being Trojan horsed?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, like, kind of what they're talking about is explicit content and extreme gore for porn brain. Um, but extreme gore, explicit content. By that I mean like explicit sexual content. I think it's interesting that like the way that that gets applied, because it's not being applied to Instagram, where I would say any content on Instagram is harmful to minors. like no minor should be on Instagram. Like it's like all pro Anna shit. Like it's like there's so much that is actively so harmful that doesn't get applied to this quote unquote harmful to minors like wording. Um that is interesting. And then also like it's fascinating to me that pornography specifically is being leveled as harmful to minors, while simultaneously attempts around educating minors around pornography are at best discouraged and at worst actively punished. Like I think that any time that there's this sort of moral panic about something, but then an active discouragement around education around it, there's something else happening. Like, obviously, that's being used as a tool to leverage some other agenda that we are not explicitly being told about.
Do you have a sense of what those agendas might be in these cases?
Yeah, I think that there has been a huge kind of Puritan overhaul of legislation that we're seeing in the past few years. I think that there's this really aggressive push towards um, nationalism that includes Puritan ideologies. Um, it includes extreme traditionalism in terms of sexuality and relationships, and we're seeing this in so many areas, and we're definitely seeing it in kind of moderation around people's private lives and private sexualities.
Hmm. Sitting here in the United States of America, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't observed a single iota of increase
You
in
see, you feel it's just so free over there.
free land of the free.
Yeah, well, I think that that's kind of what a big part of why people are so freaked out about, specifically the data collection of it all, the identification collection of it all, is that simultaneously people are asking to give over their private data and to be known as a customer, as you said, while also there is this big crackdown on human sexuality just across the board, and like particularly like anything that is quote unquote deviant under these really specific like white heterosexual Puritan understandings, which many of us in I think our private lives and our private fantasies do not align perfectly with the nuclear family model. Um so I think that that's something that people should be scared of. Like, it, the idea of a data breach, it's not if, it's when, obviously.
Totally, totally. So yeah, so I feel like there's three dimensions that come to mind for me that I really want to talk about with you, and then of course they'll sort of tessellate in other places. One is the security dimension, so let's stay there for a minute. But just for your thinking in the background, if ideas pop up, I also want to talk about the real censorship concerns that you've highlighted over the years, and the concerns around surveillance. Like those to me feel like that's like the evil trinity that we're kind of like it's the beast. They're the three beasts that we're letting in when we sort of ignore this issue. So yeah, let's stay with security. Like, there's the data breach question. Are there any other security issues that come with this type of forced age verification across these various websites?
Yeah, I mean, it concerns me that, one of uh, the models of application for age verification is biometric data. It's facial scanning. It's, capturing like using AI to estimate your age by scanning your face. And there's actually not a lot in these proposed bills on what happens to that data and what these companies are allowed and not allowed to do with that data. And obviously, you sell it. Like, every company is gonna sell the data 100% of the time. Or, it's something where it's like there's nothing like with what happened with, Zoom, for example, when we all collectively found out, I think it was 2021, that they were selling or at least giving freely all of this information that they have collected to the police. And there's really nothing in these bills and in these proposed bills around, what we can expect from a company collecting that data. And it is something where it's like already people don't feel comfortable giving their credit card to a porn company. Um, they're not going to feel comfortable giving their facial scans and passport information to these porn companies, even the ones that are perfectly reputable, of which there are many.
Totally. And of course, I mean, like anything on the internet, there are plenty of disreputable companies who, like, you take like a very, high end, let's say, example of something like a Pornhub. We would expect them to have a transparent policy around the use of data, like things that would be in the interest of protecting their reputation. But in prep for this interview, one thing I read is that they think there's north of 1 million different adult sites around the world. And so inevitably in that 1 million plus websites, there's going to be websites where if they're either forced to do this KYC type of work, or if people are finding them, outside the bounds of, we'll say normal internet, like not going onto the dark web, that they're then exposing themselves to all types of risk is kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Well, it's also something where these, disreputable websites are the ones that aren't going to be implementing this at all. This is actively, it's only punishing and it's only preventing people from accessing reputable sites that are actively, you know, working within the legal limits of wherever they're based. There are many, many, many sites on the internet that don't give a fuck about local laws, that are posting, non-consensual content, that are posting, stolen content, all these things that are essentially designed to be taken down. Like, they're designed to be these hubs that are constantly getting DMC takedown notices, but they're, operating off of a central server, and they don't give a fuck about local laws. And those are the sites that are not going to be asking for personal information. So we are actively pushing people to these disreputable sites, these unethical sites.
That's a really good point. I have another follow-up question, but there's something in the chat I want to flag because you've talked about this, so I want to kind of like pull it out. Which, also, hey Carlos. So Carlos says the line can keep being pushed further due to the very loose definition of porn itself. This is something
Yeah.
obviously that you've talked a lot about. So if you could say some words on that topic too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we look at the history of obscenity law and, what triggers these high profile Supreme Court cases, it's very rarely, porn in the colloquial definition. Usually it's film. Usually it's mainstream art, mainstream film, something that is shown in a gallery, and that's what triggers these obscenity law cases, which I think illustrates, obviously, how loose this is and how much of a risk there is for overstep and how difficult it is, kind of infamously in legislation with, uh, the I know it when I see it case, of how difficult it is to actually functionally define pornography. Also because, human sexuality is so broad that anything could be pornography, if you come at it with a pure heart and a curious mind. and so like the application of this very kind of binary understanding that is necessary for building legislation, it really just falls apart as soon as you look closely at it.
Mm, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of our most recent conversation a few months ago where you were talking about lunars and thinking about the ways that like that maybe is content that could appear on YouTube, if there's no
It
nudity.
is. There's a lot of
It is on. Okay. um,
Yes, I
but,
mean, recently I've been doing more, kind of research on, yeah, kind of like the concept of pornography and attempting to draw borders around what is and is not pornographic, and something that I find really interesting specifically about pornography as a medium is that in certain elements, particularly in like fetish content, for example, pretty often when a creator, the deeper a creator gets into a fetish and a, the deeper of an understanding they develop of their community, the less pornographic, traditionally speaking, the material becomes, or like the less explicitly sexual it becomes. So the better they get at making porn, the less pornographic it is,
mm,
which I think is fascinating and I think really applies well and very frustratingly in this exact instance.
yeah, it gets to your and you don't need to sort of outline this here. So I'll point people back to our most recent conversation on Urgent Futures from I think the episode came out in February, where you outline the three different sort of buckets or categories of eroticism, which I think is really lucid, and folks should go watch that. But I want to jump back to the industry question and the kind of dynamics that we might expect if these age verification laws pass. Like you were talking about the kind of flood to these disreputable sites that are designed to host either illegal or illegal because of the content or illegal because of copyright or whatever, um, to go to those sites. And inevitably, that's some type of detraction from the sites that are seeking to be reputable. So talk to me about the like industry cascade, from your kind of position as having been and continue to be sort of inside the industry, but also what does it mean for consumers? Like, what does it mean for people? Like, in a year, if all these laws pass and somebody, to make no judgments of them, wants to spend their time looking at some pornography, what does their experience become if these laws pass?
Yeah, I mean, and for people watching, just to have an understanding of my background, is that I've been working as like a producer and writer and on the business side of things for about 10 years. And I used to work at Pornhub. I used to work with, these very major, very mainstream studios. Now I do a lot of production, and scriptwriting more for independent studios, and I also sometimes do consulting for startups, adult industry startups. And so I think, yeah, looking like 10 years to the future, and hopefully this won't be the case, but speculating that maybe this is just generally across the board the expectation. um I think that it's a hard sell to, even for me, like I go in and I turn off all the cookies every single time I go on like a clothes website. Like I don't like giving my information to anybody. And I don't think that I don't think that us giving away our data should be normalized. Even if a company is perfectly reputable, like Pornhub, for example, I still do not believe that we should have to give them our data. In fact, I think that one of the more reputable things that Pornhub has done is actively fight against this and say, you should not have to give us your data. Like, I think that that's a green flag for a company. But it's like, I think that it will be more difficult to access ethical content online because it will be very hard for those business models to be sustainable because there just aren't the eyeballs willing to watch. Because right now, the adult industry, there are kind of two primary ways that porn companies can make money, which is either through direct sales or through ad revenue. And so, for example, a platform like Pornhub, where you can watch things for free, even though, you know, as a side note, I think that it is in everybody's best interest to pay for your pornography. And I think investing financially always will give you a better experience overall. However, I'm not against the ad-based model. It's like YouTube, many such cases. But this ad model where you can watch things for free, it's based on ad sales. And something like that will be nearly impossible to maintain if this kind of movement continues, because already we see, like, in the UK in the first 2 weeks, Pornhub lost, I think millions of users. Um, and those eyeballs are what maintains the ad revenue, you know? So it I think that the ad revenue model at large is at risk, and the only other ad revenue model in pornography that exists are these extremely disreputable aggregate sites that function almost purely on stolen and, otherwise bad content, morally bad. Um, so I think that that is like a huge risk, and which leaves, like individual studios. But even individual studios, it's very, very difficult because a lot of these independent platforms, unless they are exclusively producing content for this like huge platforms like OnlyFans that can afford to swallow how expensive it is to run age verification. Because, by the way, it's very expensive to run age verification. Some of these companies and some of these services, a normal price is $1 per verification. That's crazy expensive. That's crazy expensive for, the percentage of people that are actually going to spend money on a porn site. $1 per check, and this was a couple years ago, but I'm sure that it's something similar. That is crazy expensive. So these independent sites that people love because they are kind of this like pinnacle of porn ethics, which I feel complicatedly about, but I understand. But these like independent producers, these independent studios have a very, very difficult time functioning independently because they cannot pay that overhead. So they have to align themselves with a big platform like OnlyFans that can swallow that cost, which means that they are kind of susceptible to the whims of a platform like OnlyFans, and that kind of continues to entrench the, complete oligarchy that is happening within pornography.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
Definitely. And also, well, so a couple things. One, that also, like, anytime that we're consolidating into oligopolies, the outcome for consumers is bad. This is extremely well documented. If you disagree with that position, I welcome a lucid take that flies in the face of that, because as we see this consolidation into 3 to 5 power players in an industry means all the bad things. So just following up on that, I also want to say, and this is semi-related, for folks in the chat who are leaving comments and questions, please keep doing that. I want to try to like throw those to Noelle as I come in. And also, Noelle, if you see one that's, divergent from a question I asked, feel free to just grab it and run with it. One that came up earlier, DJ said there are secure ways to do this, by which I assume DJ means there are secure ways to do this type of KYC age verification. Do you have a take on that?
I think there are better ways to do it. I think that, ideally, this is the responsibility of a parent. This is like, I think another thing is that this is sort of the latest way that the porn industry is being made to hold, all of the things that parents and educational systems don't really want to do. Um, and I think that the best way to do this personally, if a parent is worried about, their child consuming pornography, A, have a conversation with your fucking kid. Oh, I'm begging you, please talk to your child. And also, there are things like device-based um l- controls that limit access. Like if you're genuinely like, I am really worried about my kid watching pornography, yeah, like, there are tools that you can use to prevent that, that are device-based, that don't involve biometric data collected on a huge scale. So, yeah, there are better ways. I think ultimately the best way is to talk to your child and generally instill pornography education. But yeah, the tech is there, absolutely. I think there's another interesting question around, um
Could you read it and then answer it?
yes, uh whether or not age verification works, which I think is interesting.
Take it away.
I mean, no, it doesn't. It doesn't also particularly because it doesn't work at the rate that kids understand technology. Like younger generations understand technology and are able to interact with technology way better than we can. And so most of them or I mean, the one study said 41% of middle schoolers used a VPN. And VPNs makes age restriction non-viable. And if 41% of middle schoolers admit openly to using a VPN, it it doesn't work. It frankly doesn't work.
Why do VPNs interfere with age verification?
Because right now it's based on IP, and it's essentially like a kind of a form of geo-blocking because it's regional. So you with a VPN, you can just say that your IP address is coming from a place that has not instilled age verification laws.
Yeah. DJ is back saying VPNs can be held liable too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's true. And I also think that that's risky because I think that people should be able to use VPNs. And this is where I think it gets more into like a personal philosophy thing where I believe that people should be able to have privacy online. I believe in VPN technology. I don't believe that the internet should be like a completely controlled space. And some people do, like, but I don't. I value privacy online. I think that it's something that people should have access to.
And my understanding also is that the sort of it's sort of two separate structures that are built in such a way that are creating an incredible amount of risk for adult sites because of VPNs. Where not because of VPNs, like as you're saying, like I'm a huge proponent of VPNs. I'm thrilled to hear that 41% of middle schoolers are using VPNs. Never been a better time, honestly. But that because VPNs interfere with the site's ability to do age verification, that then people are able to use the site without age verification, which then creates legal risk for these adult sites.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it really is reminding me of Sesta Fosta, which for those that don't know is legislation that passed in 2018 that kind of simultaneously made it so that platforms were able to be held legally accountable for the content that users posted on the platform, and in doing so, sort of made, like, all online sex work, human listed as human trafficking legally, and I'm laughing, but it's actually devastating, and it's, the reason why, Craigslist Personals was nuked. It it was, allegedly it was passed to try to curb human trafficking, that has been studied in and out as it was not effective whatsoever and actually increased rates of, human trafficking, so it was a huge failure, and this is really reminding me of it in that it is really putting accountability. It's redirecting accountability onto platforms that are, you know, not in positions to defend themselves, or not in positions to be defended, and then we just have to sort of deal with the fallout, just like we did and are still doing with Sesta Fosta.
Mm. Okay, well, that actually leads really, really beautifully into well, we've already talked about it a little bit, but the surveillance dimension of these age verification laws. What are the surveillance risks? And by the way, I'm not ignoring you. I'm pulling up the chat on my computer so that I'm able to see it a little bit more easily. Um, but yeah, what are the surveillance dimensions from your perspective?
Mm, I mean, generally, like, I think it's again, oh my gosh.
What?
Betty Pearl, are you guys okay? Are you hurt? Um, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the concept of decentralized identity, like, as DJ is putting in the comment. I don't personally have, like, a lot of faith in, like, the actual mechanics of, like, how that could be implemented, but I'm interested in it. I think just generally speaking, the fact that biometric data is a part of this conversation to me is really concerning. I think that, like, obviously, like, asking for passport stuff, asking for identification, this is all data that can and will be used against you. Um, I personally believe that at this point, I mean, at really any point, but certainly at this point in where politics is right now, the less information the government has on you, the better. Like, and I believe that across the board. Like, if you can avoid getting diagnosed with something, like even like we're talking about this with mental health, we're talking about it with, all these things where it's like the government is collecting this data and they are actively using it against people very openly. And certainly speaking with your internet habits and your sexual proclivities, that will be used against you 100%, undoubtedly so. So, it's the concept of surveillance, absolutely, that makes me nervous. I don't like the idea of being surveilled, but it's actually, in this case, we are seeing the application of, like, we are seeing why people don't like being surveilled in real time. Like, government made a
I can't hear you. I don't know if that's you or.
how's this?
Okay, you're good. I wasn't sure if it was my phone or I didn't want you to be saying something amazing. And yeah, but you're back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's, like, just conceptually surveillance is dangerous, but also we are seeing why we should be scared of surveillance in real time right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Even,
Um,
like, for example, yeah, there's so many applications that we're seeing right now, particularly with this administration, even with, X's on passports, with, like, the information that we have freely given the government in the past 10 years is coming back to fucking haunt us.
wise and true words. Um, I mean, let's unspool a truly dystopic kind of outcome from this. Like, do you imagine that this data would be used in your health insurance? Do you imagine this data would be used in crossing state borders? Like, do you have any kind of like doom scenarios that people should have in their mind? Again, as the admittedly like hyperbolic, worst case scenario type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, also in researching obscenity law, if you go back, if you can kind of continue to look back on what is obscene, it gets worse and worse. Like, for example, in, I believe Memphis, for the first, like, year after obscenity law kind of first entered legislation in the US, it was applied to 3 films. All 3 of them were mainstream films that depicted an interracial relationship, and that was how obscenity law was applied. Um, you know, it obs The concept of what is obscene, is very loose and is entirely based in respectability politics, which is really dangerous. Obviously, homosexuality was deemed obscene for a very long time. In many ways, it still is. And so I think that there are a lot of direct applications for it. I think that there absolutely it could your pornographic habits can be used, I think, in your eligibility for a job. I can see a world where, a background check would include what you've searched online in pornography, and the application of that. Absolutely, I can see it being used in, like, your eligibility to access health insurance, your eligibility to leave or enter countries, all these things where it's like, again, sexuality is already policed, non-normative sexualities are policed. It's becoming increasingly tight what that gets applied to. And yeah, I think people should be nervous.
Here, here. Also, finally, of the sort of triptych, censorship. Again, you've talked about this a little bit, but maybe to like bring some of that back in and sort of make the case. This comes up, of course, anytime questions of surveillance are involved, where it's like, well, if you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried. Um, but why is kind of a culture of censorship on the internet dangerous for everyone, not just people who maybe have deviant habits?
Oh my god, so many reasons. Um, I think that I think that we can kind of look at it from two angles where, first of all, even if you don't feel like you have anything to hide online, there is a very high chance that something that you enjoy at one point was deemed obscene. Just statistically speaking, again, as I mentioned, like, there are so many applications of obscenity throughout history that, yeah, probably something you like is on there. If you watch lesbian porn, which a lot of people do, guess what? Like, it's like, sure, like, you might not think that your habits apply, but don't get too comfortable with that. Um, and then secondly, I think that just generally a culture of censorship creates a culture of shame, which is what we're existing in right now, where sexuality is so rooted in shame, and pornography and how people consume pornography is so deeply rooted in shame, that we are we're not talking about it. We're not talking about sexualities, and that creates so many issues around, how people engage with sexuality, how people engage with each other. I think that it's a huge source of what's happening with, the quote unquote male loneliness epidemic, with, people radicalizing in increasingly violent ways because they are unable to kind of connect with each other because they are interacting with the world purely through a lens of shame. And yeah, and I think that if we're constantly self-censoring, if we're taught that we shouldn't express something, or even that we shouldn't explore something, obviously that's going to create even more shame.
And, not to be too much of an armchair psychologist here, but a lot of the repression that has crept back into, we should say, like, the United States of America and a lot of Western democracies have never been the sort of bastions of democracy that they claim to be. Um, Even that being the case, there's a regression taking place. And part of that regression, I would at least attribute to the culture of shame making its way to the sort of highest offices in government, so that it's like the hurt people thing of, you feel all of these things, and so you project them onto everybody else.
Of course, and we see that all the time with all of these ultra conservative politicians who get caught in bathrooms with hot twinks, you know? Like, we see this, it's become like a trope, it's become a meme of how consistently the people that are the loudest about, preventing something, censoring something, etcetera, are the ones that are practicing it and are unable to kind of confront what's happening in their own interior worlds. And then Carlos also says, this issue is also frightening close to our First Amendment freedoms. It is our First Amendment freedoms. The Supreme Court cases that are being fought right now are First Amendment Supreme Court cases. Like all of the conversation around, is this constitutional, is surrounding the First Amendment, because allegedly speaking, adult content is protected by the First Amendment. It is not technically obscene, which, again, the application of what is porn and what is obscene gets so messy here, because in a way that is really difficult to parse. But allegedly, adult content is technically still protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah, for now. Carlos had
For
also
now.
said something that I wanted to pull into this. He wrote, "Oh no, I can't get a loan for a grad program because because I signed up to too many OnlyFans accounts," and that
Yeah.
was like another strikingly realistic worst case, or not
Yeah,
even
or
worst case.
even one OnlyFans.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah, right. If the OnlyFans creator has has spoken out on some political issue that the administration doesn't like.
yes, I mean, well, relatedly, the Online Safety Act in the UK has been applied to social media posts around Gaza already. It's been like 2 weeks.
Mm. Oof. Okay, so on the agency of things side, one, if you could reiterate what your ideal, like instead of these age verification laws, your ideal kind of social or societal infrastructure for, you know, parents, educators, etc., to consider implementing in their individual spheres rather than these age verification laws. And then also, what can folks do to push against this, to either overturn laws that have been passed or to try to, make sure that the laws that are sort of being heard don't pass?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because I think this kind of concept of like, what should we do instead, hinges on a good faith understanding of the legislation that's being passed, which I don't have. I think that a lot of people that are backing this legislation are coming at it from a genuine place of fear or misunderstanding. However, I do not believe that the legislators that are putting these bills in place are genuinely scared for the kids, because if they would, if they were genuinely scared for the kids, again, there would be more education around pornography. There would be more education around sex. There would be an acknowledgement of, the actual studies that have been done on how to teach young people how to have safe sex. Um, None of that is happening. So I don't believe they're coming at it from a good faith place. If they were, always my advice is education, and conversation. Again, like, we are rooted in this shame-based society and this shame-based understanding of pornography and sexuality, and that creates so many issues. And really, the best way to alleviate shame is to bring it out into light and have conversations and connect with people, um, and talk openly about something. So yeah, having pornography be a part of media literacy, teaching it as media literacy, either in sex education or in media literacy classes, I think is really important. Um, Parents having conversations around pornography consumption with their children, even if it's uncomfortable. Sorry. A lot of parenthood is uncomfortable. Um, you gotta talk to your kids about porn. Yeah, just having these conversations, kind of releasing the shame element, um, would be, if they actually cared, that's what they would be doing. And I know that because it's not like these studies haven't been done. It's not like this is a big question mark and we're experimenting. We're not experimenting. We have really put a lot of effort collectively and like scientifically into like how to, you know, interact with this as a medium and as an issue, and the answer is education. So that's my answer if it was good faith, which I don't think it is.
Well,
And
it's a good answer regardless. like we got into this mess in part because of poor education.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
And also, like, I think we got into this mess because of a history of extremely weird religious fuckery around sex. With all due respect, we have created so much mess around sex and sexuality that we are, desperately trying to untangle right now. And a lot of our a lot of our messier, I think, realities of sex and the violence of sex and the complications of sex do get. Nope. Oh my god. Oh. Oh my god, are you guys okay? Sorry. Are you well? Are you hurting?
I'm a little
I
bruised.
know. That was a big oh. Oh no. Okay, we're back. Um, what was I saying? Oh yeah. Um, Yeah, I think that in a lot of people's concerns around pornography, they're concerned about the style of content that is the most popular. They're concerned about like the level of kind of violence that gets depicted. They're concerned about very real realities of racism and homophobia and transphobia, et cetera, that pop up in pornography as a medium. I understand that, and in many ways I agree with it. I think that my stance is just that this is, pornography is a mirror towards our own complicated relationship with sex and sexuality. It's not the cause of it. Um, and what was your second question?
The second question was, like what should folks kind of do about it, or is there anything folks can do to stop the passing of these laws from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that primarily people need to realize that this is coming for you. That it not only is it coming for you, but it's at your doorstep and you will be affected even if you are not yet, even if you don't watch porn, even if you've never said a bad word in your life, this is coming for you. There is something about you that will be labeled obscene. Absolutely. I can guarantee it. So you should care. And this isn't something that just affects the adult industry, that just affects, the quote dark web or whatever. Like this is something that will and is affecting you. So you should care about it. And, contact your local politicians, tell them that you disagree with this, get involved, understand what's going on, like any other issue that is going to affect you.
Amazing. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that feels pressing on this topic? Like, is there any kind of zone we didn't get into that feels important to talk about?
Mm, no, I do feel like we covered a lot. I think that it's a scary time that we're living in. Uh, I think that generally my biggest takeaway is try to release as little information about yourself as possible to the government.
I could not agree with that more. One drama I've been banging with friends is get a privacy browser. Shout out Movad browser made with Tor projects. Get a VPN, whichever one you want. I use NordVPN. Um, but people love Movad VPN, people love Express, people love Proton. Can't go wrong as long as you're paying for it. Like, do not use a free VPN and get a password manager. Like, those are three things that will take you max an hour for all three things that will radically improve your security online. Of course, there's a lot more you can do. But as a starting point, like that's your online seatbelt. So you should invest in it.
I agree. I'm a Proton girl myself.
Nice,
It's
nice, nice.
refreshing. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so get Proton VPN. Maybe not to end on a sad, scary note. You always have some funky thought you're cooking up, which sometimes Venn diagrams with the adult industry, and sometimes it's about candy. Sometimes it's about. Last time it was about the top erotic machinery. Is there anything that's been circling in your mind lately that's on a lighter note? That's good.
Um, yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I've been thinking about recently, which is it's not like necessarily super optimistic, but it is not doom and gloom, is that I think that there has been this really interesting flattening of perversion online in a very similar way to what we're seeing with fashion, where the concept of personal style is really being condensed into everybody wearing kind of the same thing and doing kind of the same thing. It's like the Pinterest effect, where even, the quote unquote quirky styles are really being like internetified, like Tabis or things like that. And I think something similar is happening with perversion, where there are these like certain kinks or fetishes that are becoming internetified, specifically feet and kind of cuckoldry, I think, is really coming in, like mommy stuff that I'm seeing everywhere that, at some point was particularly deviant, but now has this flavor of internet to it that means it's becoming mainstream and kind of everybody's a cuckold in a way, or if you go online, you would think that everybody is a cuckold. And I think that's really interesting, and I like to see these parallels between pornography and other industries. Fashion is one that I've talked about a few times because I think similar to fashion, pornography has like very identifiable cycles. But this is another parallel.
Wow. Food for thought. I guess
Food for
everybody's a
thought.
cuck. That's the takeaway. Everybody's a cuck.
I think more people are cucks than they were 15 years ago, which I'm not against. Look, I had I was talking to my friend the other day, and I was like, I want to be a girl cuck, and because cuckoldry is like very gendered in this interesting way. I mean, it actually has history in really the history of cuckoldry is very gendered and very racist, actually, but the current iteration is very gendered. And I was like, "Oh, I wanna be like a girl cuck, like, what does that look like?" And he was like, "Well, you'll have to get a partner first." And I was like, "Whoa! Why am I catching strays? Oh my god." Anyway, so we can end on that.
Beautiful. Noelle, this has been illuminating as always. Thanks for being such a lucid and brave interlocutor on this subject. So
Thank
few
you.
people do the work you do, so it's great to be in conversation with you.
Likewise, what a pleasure. And I hope that, I think that this is something that I've struggled to talk about just because of how many elements there are to it. And I'm publishing something on Substack tomorrow about it, on Porn World. But thank you for allowing the space for such an in-depth conversation.
Absolutely. And with that, everybody go subscribe to Porn World so that comes straight to your inbox. And then I'll get a recording of this and I'll share it with you, Noelle. So there'll be little clips and such we can feed out for folks who weren't able to make it.
Perfect. We can do just a dropping supercut.
And me checking in to make sure we're okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Bye. Thank you
See you.
so much.
Thank you.